The following segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. I'm proud to be an ambassador for Future 42, and in fact, I'm going to be up in Bellingham later this week for a Future 42 event, so I look forward to that. As I mentioned earlier, we actually taped this interview last week with Snohomish County Executive Dave Summers. I didn't realize this until I saw a story on it, but Dave's brother died recently, just a couple months ago, from a fentanyl overdose. And as someone who has a family member who died as a result of, I think a lifetime of addiction and mental illness, it really hits home. And I think there are more people who have someone close to them who has battled with addiction than maybe we know, because it's something that I don't know that it can be a little taboo to talk about, or you feel shame in it, which you shouldn't, because I think it's much more common than we know. But at the same time that, he lost his brother, of course, as the county executive in Snohomish County, he's also trying to figure out how do we deal with this fentanyl crisis that is, at terrible levels on our streets and really all across the state of Washington. And one thing happening right now is counties across the state are getting some of the money that the state got as part of the opioid lawsuits. Remember, the opioid manufacturers were sued and states got a bunch of money, including our state. And so we had the Snohomish County executive on to talk not only about his brother's passing, but also about how the county plans to use those funds as they come in. Here's our conversation. Executive Summers, welcome to unDivided. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Brandi. Glad to be here.
So first, this is a personal issue for you. Are you willing to talk a little bit about your brother? And we're so sorry to hear about him.
Well, thank you. Yes, and absolutely would like to talk about it. I lost my kid brother to fentanyl in March 16th, to be exact. He was 12 years younger than I am, was born into a household where my mom was kind of descending into pretty horrible alcoholism. And so I was a little older, kind of more formed, and I had actually my mom's folks lived up the street a block, real supportive, wonderful people. Alan was born kind of right into the middle of a pretty terrible situation. It was not pleasant at any time. My mom made life pretty miserable for all of us, but it affected him his whole life. He, as we know, early childhood trauma really decreases a person's chance for success, and he kind of struggled. He was a smart kid. He was funny, personable. People really liked him, but he kind of beat himself up a lot mentally. And later on, after being a teenager and later on got into drugs. Since I've been talking about this, I've had people reach out to me thanking me that because they had a family or a friend or a close one and have experienced the same thing. And there's a stigma about it. A lot of people say, well, it's these people's own fault. They're just weak, bad people. And it's not the case. These are folks that come to drugs through many, many pathways, and it affects really good families, and they're good people. My brother was a really, really good person. He was, like I say, he was smart. He was funny, talented. He had a business for many years as a contractor and worked hard. And he was a good person, and I'm proud of the battle he waged. I'm so sad that he lost it, but I just wanted to get the story out there because it's happening all around us. It's happening at an increased rate, and we just need to talk about it.
Yeah, and destigmatize it. And I've talked to parents and had parents on the show who, their kids died not even thinking they were taking fentanyl, bought something off of a social media from someone they didn't know. It had fentanyl in it and it killed them. And so you're absolutely right that it touches so many communities. So we're going to talk about this $1.4 million that the county is getting. But first, can you discuss, so we all know the lawsuits that happen against the opioid companies, and how is that being distributed? So the money that the state of Washington got from those lawsuits, can you explain the distribution process?
Well, a significant portion is going to the state for state programs, and then a significant portion, and I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but it's coming out to communities, local governments that are really grappling with the flood of drugs that we have on our streets and have to provide the services. So That's the 1.4 million we've received for 2022. At the end of the day, with the current settlements, over the next 10, 12 years, we'll be getting 12 to 14 million dollars total from that settlement. And so it's distributed both at the state level, but also to local communities to help provide services and other responses to the drug wave that's really hitting us.
So tell me how you're proposing to use this payment, $1.4 million, which, any money is great. I wouldn't say it's a ton of money. And so what's the most effective way you think to use it?
So the 1.4 that we have right now, the priorities that I put forward to the county council in the short term are first to expand our we call our first responder leave behind program, which really provides and makes sure that there's availability of naloxone, which is a treatment that can help somebody that's in the middle of seizures and overdoses, can save their lives. So naloxone out to first responders and to the public, so it's widely available. The first step is to save lives. And we'll also be putting money out as direct financial assistance to existing community-centered opioid response programs. So there's a number of providers that are dealing with this crisis on the street. So we're going to get money directly to them as quickly as possible. Then asking both the group and the council to think about longer term actions. One thing we think should be a priority is school-based education and prevention programs. Kids growing up today are going to be faced with this one way or another, whether it's through their friends or their families. These street drugs and lethal street drugs are really a way of life. And so we need to get information to kids and families early on so they know what they're dealing with. It's not a cure, but it's certainly hoping we are providing people with the information they need to hopefully make better decisions. So that's one aspect. And also we want to establish a mobile resource to provide medication and assisted treatment or counseling to people suffering. So establish really a mobile program that can go anywhere in the county to address the needs of folks that are battling with this.
Yeah, I like the education aspect as long as it's age appropriate, obviously, but it's something I've heard from parents who've had kids die, who got something on TikTok, is we need to talk about this in the school. So I think that's great, and it's preventative. On the naloxone front, and I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, let them die, obviously, and I'm in full support of law enforcement and members of the public having that. I've interviewed people who they got, their overdose reversed and went on to become productive members of society, and that was kind of their wake-up call, which is like, wow, I almost died. What, though, in the moment, is there anything the county can do or is doing where if you have a firefighter or a police officer who administers a dose of that drug and brings someone back from the brink of death, is it just like, okay, now go about your life, or is there an intervention moment there? Is there an efforting of an intervention?
Yeah, we don't do anything that's just kind of one stop, like administer naloxone or provide shelter for somebody without also providing services. And this is something that I mentioned. We're going to be making sure dollars are getting to existing programs. We also need the state to step up in terms of providing mental health and substance abuse services. We are underprovided. We have more demand and resources right now, but we need to grow that with these dollars that are coming from the settlements. So we very much, if we're saving a life, we need to make sure that we're following up and offering these people and their families assistance. And every individual is different. Some come to drugs through pain management. Some come to it through mental health issues. Others stumble into it. I think that's actually probably a minority that stumble into it for recreational issues. But the end result or the end goal is to help them get on a path to a productive life and get them back on track. And so the entire program is designed to do that. I don't believe in just sheltering people or just administering naloxone and walking away. We've got to help people.
Yeah.
One of the difficulties in our country, though, is people can refuse. There's we Our laws and our values are such that we don't have the ability to force somebody, but we can strongly encourage and make sure that those resources are there for them, and hope they will take advantage of it.
Yeah, and to that end, and I kind of want to wrap up here, but this has been obviously a huge topic of conversation during the legislative session, the special session that I can't believe was even necessary. But so the Blake decision, and our viewers will be very familiar with all of this, where we got with that in terms of, making sure that drug possession is still a crime, trying to balance compassion and accountability for what's happening in Snohomish County right now. Are you satisfied with the state law as it was passed in the special session?
Well, I think so. We do need law enforcement. We need common sense approaches to this whole problem. And yes, compassion. We need to come at everything with compassion. The state law, as I understand it, is finally passed, set drug possession and use, public use, as a gross misdemeanor. What that allows us to do is get people into the legal system where they can make some choices between programs to assist them, or more traditional incarceration potentially, or fines. Incarceration doesn't work any more than naloxone works unless you follow up with services to help people. Putting somebody in jail for a few days and putting them back out on the street doesn't solve anything. But I think for some folks, it can be a trigger to finally decide that they want to help, and there's a better path for them. So that's my hope, that we have really both the compassion side and also some carrots and sticks. Have you? In the end of the day, it's all the tools need to be on the table for us, because it's a very complex problem. Individuals are very complex creatures, and I think the enforcement side helps. But again, common sense.
All right, Snohomish County Executive Dave Summers, we really appreciate your time, you sharing your personal story, and we'll look forward to seeing whether this plan is approved and what impact it has. So thanks for being on.
Oh, thank you so much, Brandi.
Yeah, my heart just goes out to the executive and to his family. It's just awful, but it shows you, it's not just people who are, living in homeless camps on the side of 3rd Avenue who are dealing with substance abuse. As I mentioned to him, I've talked to parents whose kids have died, and, you can be otherwise, have a life that's been semi-normal, had a job, had a home, but the devastating impacts of it. So interesting to hear a little bit about what's going to happen with some of that opioid settlement money and what other counties are going to be able to do with it. I'm glad not everything is going to the state, because at least if you have different counties with a little bit of political will, they can do what they want with it, as opposed to it all being spent in a way that Seattle progressives want it spent. So I think that's interesting. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org, and make sure to sign up for their newsletter.